So it's easy to feel like you're stagnating when you're not present. How disciplined are you? Can you do the right things consistently? Continue to grow. I think that entrepreneurship is great, and perhaps more people should give it a shot. Because to a large extent, everybody's winging it, right? To a large extent, no one really knows what they're doing. So all the answers to my questions are at my disposal, and that means the only thing that matters now is the quality of my questions. How can you put yourself out of business? How can you go to work every day and find a tool or stack a compilation of tools on top of one another that make you obsolete? Important for us to pay close attention to what we consume because it helps to shape the person that we become. I don't want my identity to be rooted in struggle. So who are you not to be great?
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking, so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, but it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That's the quote.
Yeah. I think that is true.
Yeah. I think especially the shrinking for others part is kind of what sticks out to me the most.
That's an important part. For me, that's not the punchline. For me, the punchline is, who are you not to be great?
Yeah.
Because everything else is a byproduct of that. Another person feeling a way about your greatness comes as a result of you deciding to be great, to step into your greatness. Otherwise, you do shrink. And you give those people permission to not be the best version of themselves either. And that's oftentimes what it's connected with. It's not really that they're mad at you because you're leaving them behind. It's more so them allowing themselves to fall behind. Them allowing themselves not to take the initiative within their own lives to step into their potential. It's more about that than you, really. Because a lot of times you're still eager to be that person's friend. Eager to be around that person. At least try to motivate them. Seldom does it actually work out if the person is not interested in making the adjustments and stepping into their potential. And that can be fun, right? Rather than being angry with someone or being angry with yourself, it can be fun to pitch and catch. Because to a large extent, everybody's winging it. Right? To a large extent, no one really knows what they're doing. Conceptually, you can have some ideas, yes. But how that's going to play out in your life exactly? Very few people know. If anyone knows.
what do you think of the saying? It's darkest before dawn.
Another fact.
How so?
Because you find yourself in the darkness. And once you find yourself, then you can see the light. But until then, you can't see. And a journey to find yourself is typically all-encompassing of whatever feelings you perceive to be negative, or whatever experiences we perceive to be negative. For example, typically right before you are going to achieve the goal, or right before people achieve the goal, they stop. Because that's when it's hardest. Right? You run the race, that last bank before you hit the finish line, it's hard. Now imagine not, and that's hard, and you can actually see the bank. You can actually see the finish line on the other side. Okay? And the finish line to some people gives them some motivation so they continue the race. But imagine if you couldn't see the finish line. Imagine you was running through a forest and you really didn't know what was around the next bush. And that's typically life. You can't see around tomorrow. Typically the stress of the moment seems so it seems like it's just devouring you. And that can be a very dark place to be in. Until you get beyond the bush, or you turn that corner and you realize, oh, there's the goal. I think that's typically how it happens in life, until you get used to it. Right? And then you know, okay, I've reached the next level of complexity. This highly stressful moment is a growth opportunity once you've been through it enough. And sometimes even knowing that doesn't change the feeling. Right? Sometimes even knowing that and it not changing the feeling leads to, or at least makes it easier for people to quit. Still, even though you know. As for, if we're not diligent, eventually stamina runs out. Right? So that desire, that passion may be there now. But if we don't consistently grow and find new ways to feed it, that fire can burn out.
How do you feed it?
Continue to grow. Because if you care to nurture something other than you, you'll find ways to become better, to continue to nurture that entity in new and improved and better ways.
Because I feel like you can very easily stagnate when you feel like you're stagnating on your ways of growth.
You can feel that way. You can feel that way if you're not present. to the gym. You may not necessarily see your body changing every day, but you know that you went to the gym today, and that counts for something. You know that eventually the compounded effort of you going to the gym is going to have some type of benefit, even though you may not see it right now. Right? Even if you don't see it, even if your body never really changes externally, right? Even if you just maintain what you have now for the next 10 years. Imagine if you didn't go to the gym. What would you look like 10 years later? How would you feel 10 years later? So it's easy to feel like you're stagnating when you're not present.
To me, it almost sounds like you gotta be more than present. You gotta be forward thinking.
Backward thinking.
Backward thinking.
Forward thinking, but backward. You should compare backwards. Oftentimes we're so focused on our goal, we don't notice that we're so focused on our goal, and we're so distracted by the fact that we haven't achieved it yet, that we don't give enough credit to the fact that we're further today than we were yesterday. So, yes, it's very important to have goals. Very important to stay focused on them. Very important to keep track of your progress over time, and not just on actually achieving the goal, but also on the steps that you're making toward the goal. And oftentimes we don't think about that. We just think about the goal itself. And the objective is to pay attention to the small steps that we take every day in order to inch our way towards success. Because it's more about the process than the goal anyway. The celebration is over way too soon. Graduation is 3 hours. College is 4 years. It's about the 4 years much more than it is about the 3 hours.
But I think people do also celebrate what they can do with that degree.
They really don't know what they can do with the degree. They celebrate their imagination. But that's not really what the celebration is about. The celebration is about getting through these 4 years. The imagination is part of what makes that exciting, because now you have the opportunity to realize it. But it's more about what you endured throughout the past 4 years that allowed you to prove to yourself that you have the potential to realize these goals. So it's really a celebration of the past 4 years. The relationships that you developed. The relationships that you lost. The love that you experienced. The love that you lost. The love that you still have. All of the opportunities you got to reintroduce yourself to yourself. Feeling like you're ready, you've been knighted by life to step into the next level of independence. Really leaving the nest. Really jumping off the porch. And seeing what this adult thing is all about. Which hopefully in itself will be a long journey. So, but I think it's more about that. It's more about the 4 years than it is about you getting a job or doing anything with that degree. College is a special place.
I think it's still worth going.
Depends on what you study. But yes. Yes. If you can do it cheaply. I don't think it's worth spending $50,000 a year unless you're interested in becoming a surgeon or something like that. And you want to enhance your chances of success long term, getting into the best institutions, developing relationships, having the best opportunities after your collegiate experience, which will be very long. And making sure that you develop some long-lasting connections that you can use throughout your tenure as a professional. But if you don't know what you want to do when you study in liberal arts, I think you should still go to college and pay $2,000-3,000 a year. College is one of the few places where you are the same age at the same time, doing the same things. With the people around you. Right? It's not too many places where you're on the same page at the same time about the same thing as your peers, other than college. Right? As a young adult. It's a very different experience than high school or your formative years. You don't have a curfew, all of those things. So, it's different. When you get into the workforce, the person, you're 22, 23 years old, the person sitting next to you is 40. Your coworker. You have a very different life than that person. And in college, even if you have a different life from the person sitting next to you, chances are you have an extensive amount of things in common. And you're gonna have sitting next to that 40-year-old in the workplace.
Any tips for getting the most out of your college experience?
Tips for getting the most out of your college experience. Yes, understanding what school is for. Doesn't matter what you're studying. Really. Right, because you're going to forget 80% of it. School is not where you go to learn how to be an engineer or a doctor or etc. School is where you go to learn how to learn. And you develop a network. That's it. And school is where you learn how to be an adult to some extent. School is where you learn how to study. School is where you learn how to fail. College. A lot of students fail their first test in college, especially if they're reaching higher. Right? College is probably where you're going to be confronted with the fact that depending on where you're from and where you went to school, they taught you differently. College is probably going to be the first time a lot of people see someone from the other side of the world in person, and be able to have the opportunity to call that person friend. College is oftentimes where we learn that as people, we're more alike than we are different. We're all on the same college campus together. Whatever our differences are, we have the opportunity to hash them out. And it's oftentimes the first dose of seeing how much you can handle for a lot of young adults. Can you handle freedom? Can you handle this little bit of independence? How disciplined are you? Can you do the right things consistently? How do you structure your time and your life throughout these 4 years to make sure that you get the most out of being disciplined, and the most out of your consistency, and the most out of your determination and diligence? How do you transition from student to employee? How do you deal with peer pressure at this level? You probably had a girlfriend before, but you probably had to sneak into the house. Or you had to sneak into hers. Or you had to leave at a certain time. That doesn't happen in college. Or at least there's no one telling you that. There's no one telling you to do it. You decide if that's something you want to do or not. Some people become parents in college. So, can you handle this level of independence? Are you ready to really be out and face the world on your own? To a large extent. Because in college, it's just you and the relationships you make. Of course, you have your family and etc., but they don't take the test for you. They don't go to office hours with you. They're not there to see if you're actually studying instead of going to the party. They're not at the party with you when you don't know where you are. You went to the party, you was with your friends, everything was cool, you took a drink, didn't realize somebody slipped something in your drink, and now you can't recognize the faces that you came to the party with because you're that disoriented. Or you wake up in somebody's bed and you don't remember how you got there. And in some instances, that's okay. In other instances, you have chlamydia. In other instances, you have gonorrhea. In other instances, you have syphilis. Or somebody's calling you 3 months later saying, oh, remember that girl you woke up in her bed, you didn't know who she was? That was a wild night. Yeah, I know, it was crazy. She's pregnant. I know you ain't seen her in a while, but I seen her yesterday. She told me to tell you to give her a call. Probably the first time in your life you're gonna stay up for 3 days straight studying for an exam. Probably never sit up 3 days straight for anything. Probably the first time in your life you're gonna realize your six-pack can go away. Drugs are real. Sickness is real. We were in college with a young gentleman. I think his name was Hitch. I was an RA at the time. Beautiful person, man. And he was on the floor. He had his hat on. He had a bunch of energy. He wasn't talking a lot, but his energy was like radiant. Everybody was introducing themselves, and we were just doing a bit of an icebreaker, an orientation, if you will. And that, some people, hey, my name is whatever, I'm from wherever. This is what year I'm in. This is what I'm studying. This is what I want to do with my degree when I get it. Yada, yada, yada. And Hitch got on and he was like, yo, Hinge, I think his name was. He got on and he said, yo, my name is Hinge and I have cancer. Stage 3. 3 different types. I'm studying civil engineering, but I'm not really too pressed about that. I'm hoping I make it out of this surgery next week without a problem. And life became very real, and it got into perspective very quickly. Everybody was talking, laughing and joking, and finding ways to break the ice and say things that were funny while they were talking about their degrees and etc. He was dealing with something very real. Took his hat off. You saw he had no hair, no eyebrows. Lift his shirt up. You see all the scars on his body from the surgeries that he'd experienced. He died. He died eventually. Like 2 years later, 3 years later. But he was solid. He was a solid guy. For a lot of people, they were never roommates with someone that was fighting for their lives. All those issues that you think you're having, that you probably should consider as a big deal when you're younger. On that floor, he was a reminder that whatever you think you're going through, it ain't that deep. So, college can teach you that too. So I think that is important to go if you have the opportunity to go. Because there's no other place like it. There's no other place like it. You're going to be on the same page, about the same thing at the same time, at the same point in life. That's very rare with that many people in one place. I'd say don't miss it if you can do it. And you can do it cheaply. Because I think it gets a bad rap. To some extent, rightfully so. College is very expensive. Student debt, especially in the States, is something that's really hard to get around. It's the only thing that you can't claim bankruptcy against. You can start a business, go bankrupt, you don't own anything. Buy a house, go bankrupt, you don't own anything. No student loans. You go bankrupt, you still own it. So, to a large extent, it feels like a gamble that most people lose. but also it's, excuse me, perhaps we don't have the right idea about it. College is where you go to learn how to learn and to develop a network. That's it. Because that's the number one skill we're going to need in our lives. Knowing how to learn. Because as we age, things change. And whatever you went to school for will change. For example, schools are having a very hard time now keeping up with what's going on. So you start seeing these disciplines that they almost look made up. You're hearing about things that people go to college for, and it's like, what is that? Like, that wasn't really a question before. If you went to school to be an engineer, we had an idea as to what that was. Right? A psychologist, a sociologist, an anthropologist, we had an idea as to what that was. A biologist. Now we look at some degrees and it's almost unrecognizable. You don't know what that is. And also, we have these entrepreneurship degrees. Nothing can really teach you how to be an entrepreneur other than being an entrepreneur. Right? Trying to teach someone how to be an entrepreneur is like trying to teach them how to be creative. You either are or you aren't. That doesn't mean that you're born an entrepreneur only. You can be built. Right? You can learn the tricks of the trade depending on what aspect of entrepreneurship you're interested in, what discipline, for example, what field, what industry. You can learn that industry for sure. You don't have to be born an entrepreneur. Definitely. And you can definitely learn the basics of business. Right? Other than that, there's a certain grit that comes along with entrepreneurship. And that's something that can be encouraged. Probably not taught. Hopefully the students in those programs understand that. I don't think that is a waste of time. I think that entrepreneurship is great, and perhaps more people should give it a shot that think they have the chops for it. That's why I think college gets a bad rap. We don't understand it. Oftentimes we look at it on the surface and we take it for face value. And a lot of people end up in debt for a degree that they don't ever use. But I'd argue that they use it. They just don't use it directly. They don't go to school for marketing, walk across the stage, grab the degree, and then get a marketing job necessarily. But there are transferable skill sets that we develop in whichever discipline we study that can be applied to just about any discipline we choose to actually work within to some extent.
What do you think would be the degree with like the most value in this like fast-paced world?
Engineering.
Why'd you say that?
Because engineering is about critical thought.
How so?
Because physics is about critical thought. If you're going to create something new and improved, there really isn't anything for you to reference exactly, right? You can reference some fundamental concepts, and every field of study has that. Other than that, you have to find new ways to apply that. Right? In architecture, I can draw a nice building, but now how do I build it? The Tower of Pisa, how do I build it? The Pantheon, how do I build it? These are there's some places where it's only one of those. Whatever that structure is only one of them. We had to figure out how to build bridges that cars can go over. Bridges that stretch for miles. Not only something that can kind of like cross a river or a stream. So, not only that, those are just physical creations, but also if we look at technology, right? Your phone is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how much you really know now, technically, because we can Google anything. So if we don't know it, we can figure it out in 5 minutes. We may not have an in-depth knowledge of it, but we can have an idea of what it is. And now with ChatGPT and AI and things of that nature, machine learning, there's less of these things that we actually may need to know. And now it becomes even more about critical thought. I don't need to ask a person anymore. I can ask a machine. So if all the answers to my questions are at my disposal, then that means the only thing that matters now is the quality of my questions. And that's going to come from you. So now it's about critical thinking. It's always been about it. It's always been about critical thinking. But we were able to hide that before. We were able to run away from that and just spew facts. And that was deemed as valuable. But now we don't need you to know a whole lot of facts. Some, because the more you know, potentially the better questions you can ask. So it's still important, but it's less about what you know and more about what you can do with what you know, which has always been the case. But now it's being brought to the forefront again.
Where do you think that there will be like the biggest impacts due to AI in like 3 years?
Less need for people to perform redundant tasks. Organizations that once needed 10,000 people to make $30 billion. I'm not sure in 3 years, but potentially in 10 years. May need 1,500 people to make 100 billion. Or 500 people. That sounds more like it to make 100 billion. And if you're a $250 million organization, you probably do that with 7, 8 people. Typically, it's 20% of what you're doing that's bringing 80% of the results. So you don't need as many people to bring in 80% because you can lean on AI. Then you can shrink your human resources exponentially. Doesn't mean that there wouldn't be or there won't be new opportunities. The landscape is changing for sure.
So if they cut down on human resources, what would you advise people to do to still stay relevant some way, somehow?
I don't really think anybody can give advice on that right now. Clear instruction on that right now. Other than saying, well, maybe some people can, because some people do have an inside look. And I think it's important to stay present. Stay curious.
What do you mean by stay present?
Stay in the moment. Stay in the moment of what's going on. For example, AI is here, but a lot of people have never used it. A lot of people don't have any exposure to it consciously. Stay curious, meaning keep looking for these tools, keep figuring out how can you put yourself out of business. That was once, well, just an entrepreneur's goal. But now, perhaps it should be everyone's goal. How can you go to work every day and find a tool or stack a compilation of tools on top of one another that make you obsolete?
Why would you want to be looking for a way to make yourself obsolete, though?
So that you can improve your value in the market.
In order to not become obsolete, you mean?
Exactly. You want to put yourself out of business before somebody else does. Because then you have the edge.
Could you clarify that a bit as far as put yourself out of business? What does that mean?
If I have an organization and I offer a product or a service, what are my blind spots? What are my weak points? Where's my exposure? What am I not doing that makes my organization vulnerable to the competition? And how can I plug those holes myself?
Like that.
In other words, how can I become my main competitor? Your main competitor is someone who can potentially do what you do better. able to do it better because they see something in the industry that you don't see. They see a vulnerability in your business that you may not see, which gives them a different competitive advantage. So how can you go to work every day and find ways to see your own vulnerability, to see your own exposure, and defend against it by getting better at it? And that way you strengthen your company. You create a force field around your organization. And if you're an employee, you create that force field around yourself. The force field is there to make you untouchable, to the best of your ability, of course. And that's the goal in a professional world, to provide value that is undeniable and cannot be duplicated by anyone else or any other entity. So the faster you find it, and the better you are at addressing it, the more you improve your chances of continued success. So at all times, we should be looking for ways to put ourselves out of business.
Clear. Told me that you stopped listening to hip hop for a little while.
Yeah, it was only a week.
Thought that was gonna be like for months.
No, it will be. I'll get to that point, but I'm inching my way there.
Yeah. How important do you think it's like how to regulate your consumption of entertainment?
Say it again.
How do you see any like importance of like regulating your consumption of entertainment?
It's very important. What entertains you trains you. If I'm listening to shoot 'em up, bang bang every day, that's going to help shape how I feel, what I believe in, and how I approach the world, to some extent. So, it's part of your diet. Right? It's important for us to pay close attention to what we consume, because it helps to shape the person that we become. So just being more conscious about my consumption and doing a better job at standing guard at the gate of my life, so that only information that's going to feed me comes in. And a lot of the music, the hip hop that I consume, doesn't feed me. Even though it's great. Right? Nas is amazing. Jay is amazing. There's a lot of lessons that can be learned from them. Nip is amazing. There's also some other things in there that I can do without. And I think for the most part, I got the point. I've been listening to hip hop for 35 years. So, I think if I stop now, I can say I've done it. At least, I don't think the culture, to a large extent, will stop. But rap music, there's very few things we do in life that we can say we've done for 30 plus years and still feel like we didn't do enough of it. Kind of feel like I'm growing out of it, to be honest. That hurts my feelings, also, to be even more honest. I haven't done anything for as long as I've consumed rap music or wrote rap music. Other than coach in some capacity. But consciously dedicating my effort to something that didn't necessarily come so naturally to me. Communication does, right? To some extent, rap does, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't put effort into it. So there's, other than learning, other than self-development, and actually rap was a part of that. Right? Being able to express myself in a detailed but concise manner, in an organized fashion, was supplemented by rap. Learning how to squeeze 4 years of my life into 2 bars. That helped me to become a great writer, a better writer. Outside of rap, that is. That helped me to become an effective communicator in a way that I probably would not have been able to had I not been writing music for an extensive period of time. But as I pay closer attention to the things that I consume, I realize that rap music may not be the healthiest. So it's one of those heartfelt sacrifices. I'll go back to it from time to time. Right? If I'm out and I hear music, I'm not, running away from it. If I'm at a cookout or something like that, then it's amazing. Perhaps when it comes to what I consciously listen to, I'll be listening to a lot less rap. And I know that there's other types of music. There's other types of rap. But if I'm gonna listen to that, then I'll listen to a book that I can possibly get more context from with less effort.
Journaling has a place into critical thinking.
Yes, I do think that journaling has I think that journaling plays a big role in critical thinking, or could. Journaling helps you to understand what you're thinking about, or if you're thinking at all. A lot of times we don't really think, we have thoughts. A thought is just singular. Thinking is digging into your thoughts. Right? It's not just having an idea. A thought is like having an idea. And when you journal, you dig into that idea, if you have an idea. So then it's a way for you to see your mind watching itself. And essentially that is what critical thinking is. Someone who thinks critically is someone who proactively encourages his or her's mind to watch itself. So definitely, journaling plays a big role, or can play a big role, in thinking critically and helping you to understand what those thoughts are. For example, when I went to Rome for the first time, I journaled every day. Every day. And I kept that book for some time. I think I actually still have it. And I was so happy that I did that. That I was able to kind of relive that experience through my words. And I remember looking back at it years later and being able to see how much I've changed, but how much that experience contributed to my change. My changing. That experience validated me moving to Europe. Before that, it was a desire, but it was more like a childlike desire. I didn't really have anything to. It was only my imagination to go off of for me. But because I thought so highly of the experience, I believed that I attracted a great experience. I made it a great experience when I got there. It was hot. That in itself was a reason for me not to enjoy myself, especially at that time, because I wasn't very tolerant of the heat. And it was hot every day. We went at the end of May. So Rome in June, late May, is warm. It's not as warm as August, of course, but it's warm. I think it was maybe 88 degrees Fahrenheit every day. And I was out there with jeans on and black shirts, and because that's how I dressed back then. So, and it didn't bother me at all. I was just so happy to be in Rome that I didn't even really notice the weather. At least not, I didn't associate it with anything negative. I just had an amazing time. So, and I wrote about that every day in my journal. And I remember going back to revisit that and thinking, man, I'm happy I did this. And I recently started picking up journaling again, easing my way back into it. I'm looking forward to continuing doing that. Writing music was like journaling also. Honestly. Like you don't know, at least I didn't. I didn't know what I was gonna write about when I started writing. So, in that way, it was a lot like journaling. And when I wrote music, I wrote it for me. I wrote it for me to impress myself. At least 90% of the time. Knowing that if I impressed myself, then there was somebody else out there that I could potentially impress. But with a journal, you only do it for you. So, it's almost like a love letter to yourself each time. So yes, I think that is great for critical thinking. And it also exposes how your mind works to some extent.
Do you ever come to like an epiphany when you journal?
Yes. It's part of what led me to say I need to stop listening to hip hop music. Part of that came to me while I was journaling one day. It was a large idea, but I started thinking about all of the things that fed that idea. And rap music was one of those things. Surrounding myself with naysayers was one of those things. Not necessarily people that went against the grain necessarily, but seeing things from a negative perspective consistently, even if they were doing great things in their lives, positive things in life. This concept of always having to fight through life and push through life and grind through life. That's what hip hop is about. Hip hop is rooted in struggle. Hip hop is rooted in survival. Even when we're speaking about things that we are celebrating, we celebrate it not just because it's great. We celebrate it because of how far we came from something that wasn't great. That's what makes this thing worthy of celebrating, as opposed to just looking at that thing and saying, wow, this is amazing. Typically we associate it with something that's not so amazing, and that's what gives it its value. That's survival mode. That's lack. And I noticed that I was thriving on negative things. Part of that is being a stoic person. I understand that. But I'm less interested in constantly looking out for the negative thing. And more interested in valuing great things because they're great. not because they're not negative. And that was hip hop. Hip hop was feeding that interest in constantly referencing negativity. So I learned that journaling. That came out journaling. Not necessarily about hip hop, but that aha moment of, you know, doing something that I don't want to do moving forward in my life. I don't want my identity to be rooted in struggle. I don't want my celebrations to be rooted in struggle. I want to thrive in my life. Not buy something, not have the blessing of being able to be in position to purchase things that I want in my life. Just to purchase those things and feel like I gotta hide them from the world. Or feel like, I wish somebody would play with me. I don't want to have that feeling. It's draining. It takes a lot of energy that I could be using enjoying the positive things in my life and thereby manifesting more positivity into my life, as opposed to subconsciously giving myself barriers to overcome on a consistent basis. And that's what I was doing. And I noticed that journaling. So I want to do that. So I started changing some things around me. Putting myself in environments where I can grow. Even if it's just an environment for myself and my wife, of course. Not necessarily, being around other people per se, but just really doing things and putting myself in position to inspire myself. Reaching up. Listening to rap music and reminding myself of the negative things or the things that have happened in my life that I once perceived as negative. Kept me in fight or flight mode. And that primes you to react, overreact. And I want to be primed to respond. I want to be primed to love on people for the right reasons. Not because I recognize your struggle, because I want to fix something. Because we both up. And it's a blessing. So let's enjoy it. There's so many great things out there to experience in life. But I spent a lot of my time being distracted by the barriers in between me and that. But to a large extent, I put those barriers there to justify being in survival mode. A lot of situations that I could have handled differently. subconsciously justifying why being in survival mode was necessary. I could have went to the club, had a great time. I thought about the fact that I could potentially see somebody at the club that is probably best that I don't see. So I didn't go to the club. Missed out. Right. Especially at a certain point in my life. Granted, it was a good idea not to go to the club. It was a bad idea not to go to a club. So, these are just some examples of why it's important for me to change my appetite, and how journaling helped me to see that. The ideal result of journaling is to expose yourself to yourself. It's an opportunity for a person to get to know themselves better. It's an opportunity for a person to reevaluate the things that they think about. It's an opportunity for people to think about what they think about. Oftentimes we have ideas that sound great in our heads, but until we make them real in the world, we don't really acknowledge the substance of them or the lack thereof. Until you say it out loud, or you write it down on a paper where you can look at it and evaluate it, you may not be putting yourself in position to really judge it properly. So journaling is an opportunity. It's another form of a mirror, but one that exposes who you are internally, not just what it is externally or who you are externally.